Like to thank you all today for coming to our URISA, Texas, May 14. Oh, sorry, not May 14. That's the one we did before. This is the end of May presentation. This is May 26th, day after Memorial Day. And we have Jordan Carmona with us today. He is a GIS analyst at the City of McKinney, Texas, a certified GIS professional, a GISP. Holds degrees in both history and political science from UNT, University of North Texas, and he's also pursuing a Master's of Science in Data Science at the University of North Texas Toulouse Graduate School. Presentation today is going to be a process for you and others, novel technologies. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Jordan and let him get going. If you all have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and we will read them off to Jordan at the end. But Jordan, we appreciate you being here today, and take it away.
Well, thanks for thanks for having me. Okay, so let's get this started. Hello and welcome to Novel Technologies, a process for you and others. This is a presentation about how I like shiny things. Well, really how one goes about incorporating shiny things into the other things that they like to do. Which is to say, this is a presentation about process. This is an introduction for this guy. As a forewarning, if it is on the slide deck, then I'm probably not going to say it. I read an article recently about how not to introduce yourself, so instead, I wrote these things. When I see these kinds of presentations, I'm always asking, yeah, but how can I do that? What are the prereqs, as it were? In no order, here's a list, and obviously you have to have a desire to do things. The context around McKinney is super important for a few things. That kind of explosive growth still continues to this day. We're the 4th fastest growing city nationwide. So we're a pretty large city with a small town feel and a lot of small town processes. This is a signpost while we're talking about technology today. Aside from all the interrogatives, who, what, when, where, how, we have to understand that the world is ultimately constrained by your interaction with it. While the last item deals with the intrapersonal, we happen to live on a planet with a bunch of other people. So interpersonal skills are paramount. No person is an island, etc. So this popped into my inbox last June. It went something along the lines of, hey, you don't know me because I'm new, but I've got this parking study that I need a bunch of people to sign up for to go outside and count cars, and it's a lot of people, and it's kind of complicated, and I heard that you were the Google guy, so can you help me with this Google form so people can sign up for this thing? And perhaps I was less than helpful, but instead of saying that I would or could, I let them know that we happen to have a drone, and had they considered using that instead of people. At this point, there's been zero real discussion about the drone, other than me sending over a spec sheet that would mean absolutely nothing to anyone other than a videographer or a photographer. Think lens size, ISO values, frame rates, etc. Really unhelpful stuff on my part. So 100% don't do that. So why is this even a slide? Because mistakes are great when they belong to someone else. The only benefit of doing it yourself is that the shame tends to sear it in really well. A better way of having a hook is to provide something your end user or client can see, a demo, an example deliverable. For spatial things, talk is really cheap. People need to experience what's possible. So their follow-up email contained a few attachments and a battery of questions. The consultants that worked on the previous parking study had used a drone in 2014 to take 4 images of our downtown. So this wasn't my hook, and we could nitpick, but we won't. Some of the initial questions they had: what about missing vehicles? Where can it fly? Over people? How do we get the right angles to resolve those missing vehicles? And at this point, it's really kind of amazing. These are the only supplemental materials they had on hand that I didn't know they had. And it was enough to pique their curiosity to keep the conversation going. This is called succeeding in spite of yourself. At this point, I sent a follow-up email saying that we should schedule some time to meet and discuss in person. This probably was the first smart thing that I did during this project. In-person conversations crush email communication. There's so much more information available to both parties. Tone, eye contact, body language, instant clarification, follow-up questions. One of the finer aspects about interpersonal communication is understanding how to be quiet. I think a lot of us are super solutions oriented. So 3 sentences in, we take over the conversation, just word vomiting all the ways that we can solve that. Ultimately, others just want to be heard. And in every situation where you're trying to help, we have to remember that they are closest to their work, making them the subject matter expert. Their greatest value to you should be their experience and familiarity. So in our conversation, I learned a few things like, what is the point behind a parking study? How they're usually done. The project manager in this instance has a master's of planning from UCLA. One of his professors is renowned for doing this type of thing. And it was just super informative to really understand what was vital in terms of data. What he needed from me is assurance that the data from every count or inspection would be available in a tabular format because his intended workflow was going to be Excel based. I didn't need to bore them with all the details of related tables and spatial blah, blah, blah. Yes, I can deliver that thing that you need. Yes, there are some details that we can discuss later if needed. On the interpersonal end of the scale, our conversation had made one thing very clear. Trust here is huge. New employee, first big project. His reputation, by and large, was resting on my skill set and ability to deliver as promised. This flavored the entire project and it came with some overhead. Can this be done on time? Is this too much? Ultimately, everything came back to how do we minimize risk? This was a kind of pressure that I hadn't felt really since leaving the private sector. Believe it or not, this kind of thing outside of my wheelhouse. Another way of thinking about novel technology is as a novel workflow. You're doing a thing with different tools. For me, this thing was the number of buffers needed to cover the downtown with a few constraints. Classic GIS workflow. So I took the drone outside, flew up 200 feet, took some photos, looking at them, referenced an arbitrary sharpness I was looking for, and created a buffer to match. I'm kind of a tactile person, but this was actually the first time that I went physical on an exploratory analysis. Some of this was for me, helping to kind of see the downtown at a constant scale and immersively. And the rest of it was for the project manager to be involved in a more comfortable way than over my shoulder looking at ArcMap. The result was an almost circular grouping of 9 flight locations. Flight locations were influenced by what property the city owned and having and or establishing relationships with property owners. Talk about risk. More flight is more risk of something going wrong. And we need the time to pull off all the flights before the next round of inspections. This series is a bit better illustration of how multiple angles were needed for a minority of the 155 lots. The ray tracing shows what we call secondary panorama, while the filled polygons represent the primary panorama used. So this is just kind of the nitty gritty, if anyone is interested in a little bit of the nitty or the gritty. So why a dry run? Because at this point, we still didn't have a firm yes or no from management on the question of the drone. Less than 2 weeks out, and the employees were still signing up to do the on-foot counts. Our conversations right now are being run up between 3 managers, something not to do. Ideally, the people closest to the work decide on the appropriate way to move forward. This is the culture that we're trying to create in McKinney, and something that is obviously a work in progress. In organizations that have not implemented this type of framework, the obvious thing to do, and the thing that I should have obviously done, is to have meetings with all the stakeholders. This oftentimes is difficult to do. When an Outlook calendar is full, a phone call or office visit can help underscore the need to quote unquote make time, especially for a time sensitive project. Doing a few dry runs was an excellent opportunity to see how well everything would work. iPad minis will overheat in the Texas sun just about instantly, then they turn off. Apparently this is a known thing, and a thing that I did not come across when researching the type of iPad that we should purchase with our drone. So to complete our scouting missions, I took the iPad out of the case and hauled it around in an insulated lunchbox with an ice pack in it. For anyone that's saying, hey, that's crazy, it was. We ended up borrowing an iPad Pro from one of our executives, and we were able to use that during the actual mission space. We still had to be cognizant of utilizing shade whenever possible. So this is the autopilot application that we used. It's produced by a company called Hanger that was bought out by Map Pilot something. As an aside, they stopped really development of this application, so it only works for Phantom 4s. It won't work for your Mavic 2s or anything like that. I was bought by AirMap. So how does one stitch together a 360 photo? Did I mention this was out of my wheelhouse? So cue the frantic Googling. I was concerned, but I knew that other people did this all the time, so I'd probably figure it out too. Googling can be a bit hard, and I'll ashamedly be the first person to say, have I spent a full half a working day Googling? Yes, I have. At the end of the day, everything is magic. Electricity, magic. Combustion engines, magic. Computer programming, magic. Or at least it seems like magic until you learn more about it. Simple stuff like what terms to use, the process. And Googling is unwinding that magic into something intelligible. In this case, there was an evolution in terms. I started out with panorama viewer application windows, then 360 photo maker, create sphere photo windows. And I finally stumbled on this gem. It's a free product from Microsoft Research called Image Composite Editor. And it's perfect for what we needed. Fast, easy to use. So here's a quick video of that. So you just grab whatever photos you want, load them in. It will automatically detect the structure, or if the structure is kind of complicated, you can set the which way the photos are supposed to go, which is cool if you're like taking photos of whiteboards or something. So it does all the heavy lifting of aligning your images and stitching them together. And that was not sped up. That's just my beefy computer, big beefy. And you get this nice, super high resolution, searchable sphere photo, which is kind of neat. As you can tell, you can't read license plates or anything like that, which is one of the concerns we had with privacy issues, but you can see very easily where cars are and where cars are not. So one of the cool things about this program is that you can not get seasick while you're watching it. You can save a definition file, and so when a user wants to see a sphere photo, instead of having to go through the process we just went through, they just double click on the file, it brings up everything, and then they have to wait for the images to recomposite on their computer. But this is a Microsoft Image Composite Editor, super cool, free from Microsoft, which really was awesome just to have everything work the way they're supposed to. So this is how we were going to view our results from any given inspection. So I'm horrible at not doing other things while on Zoom. So for other people like me, you can go ahead and get out your phone and browse a sample sphere photo series of the 9 flight locations. We'll talk about this app a little bit later, but yeah, for people that need to multitask while doing other things, this is for you. All right. Okay, so 10 days from the start of the parking study, we were not prepared to fly. Our mission would require a panorama flight along 9 sites for a single shift, repeated every 3 hours, 3 to 4 times, depending on the day. Each shift required 2 batteries. The slow charger that came with our kit would need to be replaced with a fast 200-minute charger, and we'd need a 4th battery. So 2 on the charger, 2 for flying, rinse, lather, repeat. While we waited for our supplies, there was another issue to take care of. We didn't have a data set. Wait, what? A thing we done twice before didn't have corresponding GIS data sets? Yeah, paper and Excel all the way. We actually had a handful of shapes for some of our larger lots, but nowhere near the 150 plus lots we had documented. Those shapes also had no proper attribution columns, parking totals, ownership, classification, etc. What we needed was a unified schema to connect all the different analysis areas, quadrants, rings, parking lots, and a related table to track inspections per lot over time. We also needed to annotate all of those lots to connect each with the panorama locations that stored the data. This would have to include showing blind spots. After the test flights, building out the layer, annotating every photo, being able to say, there are exactly 10 blind spots, and this is how we'll deal with them. We can do this because we went ahead and did it. And then just days before the counting, we got our approval. The old pen and paper workflow required 19 counting shifts, 1 person per quadrant, 76 person shifts. The new drone workflow would have 19 counting shifts, 1 pilot, 1 visual observer, and 38 people shifts, and a golf cart. So this is probably a good spot to deviate for a second. How do we fly? How do we do it legally? So drones of the type that most of us would be familiar with are known as small unmanned aerial systems, SUAS. These machines participate in the national airspace and as such are regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, via the Part 107 rules. This is the long form way of saying the federal government is very interested in drones safely sharing the sky with expensive aircraft that are piloted by actual persons. So it's a money thing and a life safety thing. Because of this, you have to be licensed by the FAA as a remote pilot, and you have to have permission to operate in controlled airspace. Controlled airspace looks like this. DFW is kind of a busy place, airspace-wise. There's like a large airport or something somewhere. McKinney looks like this, a bit easier. It's what we call Class D or Class Delta airspace. The McKinney National Airport, call sign TKI, is responsible for everything within the blue dotted line, from the ground up to 2,900 feet. In order to fly anywhere here, you have to seek mission approval from the FAA or be granted an ongoing waiver. Our waiver stipulates that we fly all of our missions with a visual observer, among other safety considerations. Visual observer, just like what it sounds like, someone to keep eye contact on the drone and make sure we're not getting into dangerous situations, looking out for planes, that kind of stuff. While planes are generally supposed to fly above 500 feet, there are restrictions as to where a drone can fly. This is called a UAS facility map. It tells you how high you can fly in restricted airspace. Our mission is right in the middle of a yellow tile, a 100-foot flight ceiling. The altitude that we need to adequately cover the downtown in only 9 flights was 300 feet. So we spoke to our air traffic control about the project and received permission to exceed the flight ceiling. We also call them when we begin and end flight operations. That's the long and short of the Part 107 rules that allow us to fly. It's also why we chose to fly panoramas instead of a search grid, but more on that later. So this is the completed product, a standard license or above Esri workflow. And yes, I pushed our new employees straight into Arc Pro because why not? As much as I would have liked to integrate the panorama into the attachments, it really wasn't meant to be. We could attach the projection files, but Arc Pro didn't know what to do with them, so it wouldn't open them. So you click on a spot, and then you have your primary and your secondary panorama, and we annotated each photo to let you know for exactly which spots you should look per which panorama you're looking at. So pretty straightforward. And here's our related table showing every inspection on a day-by-day or shift-by-shift basis. Vehicles present, vehicles total, that kind of thing. All right. So does anyone else see how close this was to around our world in 180 flights? But it was like clockwork. Every shift, a slam dunk. The last shift got rained out, so we planned to get that reshot in a week. And then the drone broke because the motor burned out. Because I didn't know what a gimbal bracket was for. We rode from site to site in a golf cart, and instead of repacking the Phantom, we just palmed it from area to area. And each time the gimbal bracket moves, it degrades its span of life. So you're in a golf cart bouncing around like a Jeep Wrangler in Jurassic Park, you're just ruining your gimbals. So it broke, but on our last shift, our heroic project manager ran from lot to lot, taking photos of everything to save the final shift, which they did, and it was great. So data entry kills everything. We really struggled with this. Our hardware wasn't up to spec to run image composite editor in multiple instances or even very well singly. So ideally, you'd open up a few panorama at a time and work through the downtown in groups. One at a time with significant delays, and opening each panorama quickly became an annoyance. And because of this and some training issues, the end-to-end on data entry took about 80 hours for a single individual doing the data entry. So there were no meaningful results, in quotes, from our work for 2 working weeks, which is not a great look. The new drone workflow took as much time in data entry as the pen and paper workflow took for inspections, not including the drone collection time. Some could look at this and say that we merely transferred some outdoor work to indoor work. Summer in Texas, sign me up. However, doing it the drone way meant that we also had reproducible photographic evidence to back up every single count, which can come in handy when a thing becomes political, or there are questions about the accuracy of your data. You have actual evidence to show people. Technically, you could call it a stalemate. The more nuanced view is that the prototype of this novel workflow consumed a comparable amount of time as the legacy workflow, pen and paper, while outperforming in data retention. Definitely, there is room for improvement in terms of data entry, which could have been performed by more than one person. Before data entry was completed, city leadership made a judgment call to collect a second data point. Using access to cell phone-based data, it was determined that a week-long period in fall was actually the busiest. So a second count in October. Communicating results is everything. Unfortunately, the optics of a thing are taken into consideration as well. So 80 hours of data entry by a single individual looks not great, as does needing to wait 2 weeks to have results. This meant that the drone workflow should be replaced by something simpler with more immediate deliverable. There are additional reasons as well. If the weather wasn't perfect, we wouldn't be able to fly, which would ruin the point of counting during this super specific window in October. Of course, using paper is out of the question, but what do we use to implement? Esri everything, right? Collector, survey 123, not so much. There weren't enough licenses readily available for a collector workflow. There was staff unfamiliarity with survey 123. So the quickest turnaround, the greatest familiarity, was actually Google Forms. Designing the most foolproof entry for end users was pretty cumbersome. First, we had to chart out a walking path for each quadrant and specify an order to lots that was, quote, intuitive for users and not necessarily optimized. So again, here's a QR code for our Parktober form. And let's take a look at some of it. This is a pretty overview map of some of the walking paths. So we designed this map, cut it into pieces, and we upload those into Google Form for every X number of lots. If anyone didn't catch the QR code, feel free, again, to follow along. For everyone else, here's a video. So pretty straightforward interface. You choose the day, the time, and the quad. Depending on what quad answer you choose, it'll take you to a quadrant-specific set of questions. We have the full overhead map with some horrible fig leaf labeling, a checker flag for an end. Then we cut it up into bite-sized chunks. So a little section, you have an overview of what lots are what, and then you're asking questions on each one. Each question has a nice narrative so they know exactly what it is. It also helps that our office is in downtown, so for the most part, staff had familiarity with everything that's going on with the parking study. For all the hype building up to Parktober, it went off without a hitch, which really is exactly what anyone wants when using new technology. And we had no complaints from any of the end users. The last piece fell on me, though. How do we get this data out of Google and into our GIS? So here's another QR code. And while the result seems effortless, the path to get there was anything but. My initial thought was to use some sort of pivot or transpose to get where I needed to be. It wasn't until 4 or so hours crawling through Stack Exchange that I found out about the melt function, and then everything just fell into place. So Google Forms have a Google Sheet backend. This is what our data looks like, barely 100 columns long, and just needlessly wide. Every column represents an inspection of a parking lot. That's just a ton of data, kind of in the opposite format that GIS people are used to seeing things in. So this is Google Colab. It is a hosted Jupyter notebook. All in all, the process is only 6 lines. But you know, not having ever done something like this before, finding the sauce was a bit of an issue. So we look at our data, pretty long, 161 columns. Then we melt it based off of a few keys, which gives us like 15,000 records. But then we scrub those records out where there's NA values. We're left with about 3,000 records, which is what it should have been. So walking paths, time consuming to create, but reusable for the future since parking lots don't generally change. Cannot overstate the ease of use for end users. No complaints, no questions. We did a training component where the project manager did a walkthrough of how to use a Google form. We didn't have photographic evidence, more of a trust thing, but we also had automated data entry. So someone has done this before you, or better than you, or at least a thing that you can extrapolate to your own workflow. Working with others is less stressful than working alone. 171 flights is nerve-wracking. Knowing an entire project rests on you is nerve-wracking. Some things can't be done without money. Extra battery, fast charger, spare props, spare propellers. If your organization is big enough, you can borrow things like an iPad Pro or golf cart. Your drone should have an annual budget. Without it, your necessities are only filled on the whims of others. So have friends in your organization or have a big organization. Obviously, focus on communicating results better. So for all the work that we did on this, we made a paper product. This could have easily been a story map and immersive, but the decision was made to have a paper product because that's how it was expected to be delivered, and it's always been a paper product, so it's a paper product. So some things that could have been better on the communicating results thing, right? Going back to the beginning, if you wait for someone to ask you to do a thing, you're going to be waiting for a while. So the expectation, the thing that I should have done with this, I should have just done it. And hey, here's the thing, use it, don't use it. It's just hard to tell people about a thing that they haven't done or seen. And you as a person are probably a more reliable, more accountable to getting it done than someone else because you have direct power over yourself as opposed to other people's selves. Anyway, let's see what else we got. So things that I would do differently next time is get a COA. It's a certificate of authority, and it allows you to do things that you're not allowed to do with a Part 107. So this is a post from the Esri GeoAI team, and they're using a search flight style pattern for their drone to make an ortho image and then use machine learning to count cars. We can't do that with a Part 107 because you're not allowed to fly over people or fly over moving vehicles, that kind of thing. With a COA, you can do that. Usually, they're just for public safety agencies like your fire department or your police force, but they've actually opened it up to transportation agencies as well. So this would fit under that banner. Then I think another thing I would change is probably find an Esri integrated method of serving out the sphere photos. You know, we're an Esri shop and all of our web products are Esri products, and it'd be nice to push something out to the public that is a point and click kind of thing where they can see all the hard work that we've done. Though I'm a huge fan of the Kula application. Do 3D and I don't know, it's neat. Anyway, that's about it for me. So I'm just here if there's anything anyone would love to rap about or things that you want to kind of kick a little bit, let's do it.
Jordan, thanks so much. And it was a great presentation and really enjoyed it. Yeah, we definitely got us some questions for you here. One question I have for you, and I'm going to go ahead and start this off here, is your sphere. In exporting it, and you want to find it to integrate into an Esri. What is the export? What is the format of the sphere? Like you export it it's a dot what file?
So it can be a JPEG, a PNG, a TIFF. It can be all sorts of things. You need some sort of framework on the client end to make sense of it. When you export a sphere photo out without a viewer, it ends up looking like this last slide of kind of
Okay.
a warped, distorted image. But those images are supposed to be searchable. But when you present them out without a framework, they're static. And so you get whatever distortion was saved.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I was wondering if you could store those within Vimeo and then export them back in. I'm not sure if they have a viewer function, but you can do your framework as well. So maybe something interesting to explore. Yeah. Let us know if you figure it out, or if anybody on the call already has a solution for it. By all means, wave and let us all know. But well, let me go ahead and go back through here. I see we have some people from all over. We've got someone in here from like what is the East Idaho? So Heather and well, hey Bon Harper, out there in Los Angeles. Good to see Bon on here as well. And Scott is not in India. And then so yeah, it's always neat to have show where everybody's located. Of course, we've got Jim in Arizona, and then we've got our Lubbock connection out there, West Texas. So all over really. So it's a pretty good demographic representation. Let's go ahead and see here if I can get some more questions. Go ahead, Dylan. You want to ask one?
Yeah, no, there's one question on here, or just to start,
Yeah, go
from
for it.
Lola Isom. I think that's how it's pronounced. She asks, how cumbersome was it to obtain your federal approval for the flight area? And how many people in your organization are authorized to actually do the flying?
Oh man, the intricacies of the federal government. So we did not need to get FAA authorization for this flight series. We have a blanket authorization to fly in our airspace. It started as a series of mapping projects under construction in the city, but since it's a long-term project, we have free reign over our airspace. You submit these to the FAA, and they take something like 2 to 4 months to get back to you. So I got my first waiver approved, and then I read a bunch of different waivers. So I was like, I'm going to write a really awesome one and just get us just the best blanket waiver possible. And the FAA rejected it, and they're like, no, this is horrible. So we have our one waiver, and we've been renewing it every year. So for us to get authorization, we had to do it through the tower. They want us to call them. So we have a very good relationship with TKI, and we do it through them. We can do that because they're not part of the LAANC yet, which is an automated authorization thing. So that has some of its benefits of being able to call someone on the phone and do a thing as opposed to trying to submit something through an app. But that's what we do this. And really, I'm the only person in our organization that's kind of doing this stuff, and it's not even my main hustle. So it's a pet project or passion project, I guess.
Okay. Well, very nice. Let's see here. What flight planning application was used?
So we used an application called Autopilot, which I really liked. But like I said, the application has not received really any further development. So we switched to Litchi. However, I don't think I've actually used Litchi yet to do any things, but that's what the people in UAV Mapper subreddit, that's what they said. So I'm doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Liche is really nice. You can actually pre-plan at different waypoints at different heights, and push it to your drone. So it's really cool. So I've goofed with that some. Let's see here. So going down here says, oh, Alexander is using drone deploy to take spherical panoramas. Have you tried this? And he says it does allow you to share the panoramas via a browser link, which would be great. I'm assuming he's talking about taking that URL into an AGOL, an ArcGIS Online. So have you checked that one out yet?
No, I've made panoramas in DJI's native application. I think I've played around with Drone Deploy a little bit, but not too terribly much.
Yeah. Oh, very, very nice. Anybody else have any questions for Jordan? Can you pull up that spherical? You actually did the, was it a video you did?
Oh, yeah. Let me get in on this.
So where's the, I haven't goofed with this one yet, and I think that it would be kind of fun to explore this one more. I think it'd be a great way to incorporate into an AGOL or something, especially if you can get them.
Yeah, so this is image composite editor. Autopilot did a panorama flight. They took 17 separate photos, and then you just create the structured panorama inside of image composite editor.
Who
It's
makes
got a
this,
few.
Jordan?
This is made by Microsoft, actually.
It
They
is?
have
Okay.
a branch called the Microsoft Research, and they do some free products. They have a time-lapse product that's pretty neat as well.
Was this? Do you know if this is brought into the Microsoft anything to do with like Autodesk Recap, or has it integrated any softwares that you know of?
I do not think so. I think it's standalone.
Okay. No, this is really interesting, and so hit your export. I'm curious. This maybe I figured everybody might want to see it as well. See, so if you wanted to export this out.
Yeah, if you want to export this out, you click the next button twice, and then your export options are like at what resolution level, and then what photo style, either JPEG, PNG, TIFF.
Okay, this one would be worth exploring. Let's see how it brings out. It'd be nice to bring it into an AGOL because we ended up getting Vimeo to do our drone videos to attach to AGOL components for a large long pipeline. Just it would seem like our best solution, but let's see here. Oh, Daniel, you got a good question here. Yeah, have you looked in the site scan? It's a 3DR site scan that Esri purchased the end of last year. I guess they and they're pushing it really hard, moving away from the drone to map. So, have you checked into using it as a one complete package?
I actually saw a webinar on at a different a different rabbit hole I've been going down the last 2 weeks. But on a webinar, I saw a demo of site scan, and that looked super. You can upload your stuff in the field, and then automatically populates 3D models and stuff, and it was pretty slick.
Yeah, it really is. You should check it out. And yeah, thanks Daniel for bringing that up because it is kind of a more recent technology acquired by Esri, and I know they're really pushing it along with their image server. They're tying in the drone services and the image server. It's the ArcGIS Enterprise extension package to tie all this stuff in together. So, but no, good questions here. Anybody else? We've got a little bit more time here. Dylan, you got something for Jordan?
I saw one by Imran asking what drone platform we're using. We're using a Phantom 4 Pro version 2,
Okay.
which is super. I really like it. There was a supply issue last year. They all like went off the market, but they're back now. So I would wholeheartedly recommend it. We just got a Mavic 2 Pro, and I love it. It's a lot easier to lug around. But yeah, so this is a Phantom 4 Pro version 2 is what we used here from DJI.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great drone, and the camera on it is pretty fantastic. So let's see here. Anybody else right now? We got a few more minutes here. Type away or raise your hand. Could you share your code to convert the Google form data from Catherine?
Oh yes. I actually have. It's gonna be what's the word? Anticlimactic. Anticlimactic. It's 6 lines of code, but it works, which is the best kind of. Oh, that's not it. And that's not it.
Well, if you can't find it, we'll.
Oh no, it's right here.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
Here. So yeah, this is a fully working code demo. It's hosted in Google's Colab, which anyone can access. If you have a Google Drive account, you just need to go to add apps or whatever. But it's fantastic. It's just a Jupyter notebook.
Okay. Is that all right? Catherine says great. So, well, Dylan, do you have any questions here? I know we could finish up a little bit early if needed, but Jordan, we really appreciate you sitting in the day after Memorial Day, and we are looking forward to our next URISA Texas monthly speaker series. I think today, Dylan, I think I saw the height was 84 folks, so that's
84, 85.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good. And so we've been hitting good numbers for a long time now. So we really appreciate everybody coming on in and hanging out with us here. So by all means, check out Trivia Night. That actually sounds like a lot of fun, and definitely no cheating on the back end with your phones. So, but hope to see you all there. So Dylan and Jordan, appreciate it. Go ahead, Dylan.
Jordan, thank you very much. Yeah, you're getting some great presentations, Jordan. A lot of great information, thank yous, and I know I took away a lot from your presentation today, and hopefully can implement some if I ever get in the situation to start flying drones for some mapping projects. So.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. This is, always a little cringy to talk about yourself, but I like this stuff, and I like working for local government. It's a public service or whatever. So if anyone has any questions about specifics, or you've got a thing that you want to talk about, I am totally available all the time. This just the coolest stuff in the world, and we get to work on it. So that's neat.
Yep.
Yeah, and anybody reach out to Jordan if you want. And I know he's been a great person to talk to and collaborate with. And hopefully, Jordan, we can have you back on sometime in the future.
Hopefully, I'll do some cool things.
Yes.
All right, everybody. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your short week. And we'll see you all next month, or see you at Trivia. And y'all have a good rest of the day. We'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks. See you, Jordan.
Bye.